Let's turn off our cell phones. Make sure they are away. Okay. Let's get ready to be respectful. Okay, I'd like to welcome. We have two of our Board of Education members here with us this morning. We have Ms. President Cheryl Felice. So again, I know this is going to be a great assembly. We're looking forward to doing it twice with all of our grades here today. And here we go, Ms. Oates.
Okay, good morning everyone, and a warm welcome to our Women's History Month assembly with author, TV writer, and VHS alumni, Ms. Kara Thomas. Same seats that you are sitting in today 15 years ago. And now, here she is. So as you can see up here, Ms. Thomas was a member of the Bellport High School class of 2008. That is her yearbook photo. And the editor of the school newspaper at the time. And here you can take a look at her 8 published books. Books in preparation for today, and thank you to all of you who have written questions for Ms. Thomas and submitted them to me. Your questions may be asked today. Our assembly is going to be centered around all of the questions that students have written. So it is very possible that your question will be asked today. Let's see. Without further ado, I think we are going to kick it off with a question from Josiah Reed. And his question is, Ms. Thomas, how would you describe your time at Bellport High School?
I was picked last in gym, and that kind of sums it up. No, not, well, maybe like second to last. But I was not very cool, as you can probably tell from that sweater I was wearing in the Clipper picture. Glad we moved on to the next time. Yeah, I don't know, I was kind of quiet, I think. I was very lucky that I had such fantastic teachers that kind of recognized that I was like that quiet kid. I feel like they describe me as an old soul, and when you call a kid an old soul, it really just means you're going to need a lot of therapy as an adult. But I became a writer instead, and I don't really think I would have become a writer if I didn't have such supportive teachers here, because this was the type of place where I was really allowed to thrive creatively. I mean, I wrote for the variety show, I wrote for the paper, and if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have had teachers like Ms. Hoffman or Ms. Emma or Mr. Ansting that were like, really, have you ever considered being a writer someday? So yeah, I mean, looking back, it probably felt like the longest 4 years of my life being in high school, but now I'm like, wow, that actually was like such a blip on the radar. But yeah, I was really lucky to go here and have such wonderful supportive teachers.
That is the perfect segue into our next question, which Hannah will ask.
How did Bellport High School help you succeed as a writer and get you where you are now? And did you have any especially influential teachers?
Yeah, I kind of jumped the gun with that. I named all the awesome influential teachers, but special shout out to Ms. Hoffman, who wrote in my senior yearbook, I want a shout out in your first book. And at the time, I was like a whole book, like I was supposed to sit down and write a book. Like that never really occurred to me that that's like something that I could do. I knew that I always liked to write, and I wanted to maybe pursue some sort of career in writing. I actually wanted to study journalism. I wanted to write nonfiction. So I really think that those influential teachers kind of set me on a path where I saw like a creative career and writing fiction as a possibility, and I really don't like it. Seems like such a small offhand comment that a teacher like would write in a student's yearbook, but when somebody believes in you before you believe in yourself, like that really kind of like changed the course of how I view like writing as a career, I think. So yes, very thankful.
And now Cameron, an aspiring writer, is going to ask a question as well.
Yeah, deal.
What inspired you to write books?
So what inspired me to write my first book? I had always just like had this idea that I thought would be like this character in my head. Like I had written like a short story my senior year of high school. And Mr. Folks is not here anymore. I'm super old, he's been gone a while. So he had written like, I really love this character, this would like make a good book someday. So I always kind of like mulled that over, and like I really just liked this character. He was like this 23-year-old guy named Dan who wanted to be like a rock star or something. It was like really weird and really dumb, but when I got to college, I was studying like pre-law and history because my dad had convinced me that being a writer was like not a real job. It was just like something that people said they were going to do. It's like, oh, you're working on a book like you and everybody else. So I was studying history. I was like, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer because when you like to write, lawyers write a lot. So I went away to college in Boston, what I thought was like my dream school, where I was going to do like pre-law, I was going to like make a ton of money as an attorney or whatever. And I was just absolutely miserable there. I didn't really like what I was doing. The coursework was so dry, and I was like, I can't do this for like the next 8 years of my life. I don't really want to be a lawyer or go to law school. So the way that like I dealt with like the fact that I was stuck at this school until the end of the year before I could transfer to Stony Brook and major in something else was that I sat down and I started to write a book about this weird character named Dan that wanted to like join a band and like tour the world. It was like, I finally finished it. It was the worst book I've ever written. It was horrible. I'm like so glad it never got published. But the idea was just one that I had for years, and one day I just sat down and started to see if it was like an actual story.
Thank you. And now Audrey is going to ask a question.
Where did you start when you decided to write a novel, and how did you get your writing process?
So I just sat down and like started winging it. Like I didn't really have any idea like how to write a book. I had like consulted different like books like on writing, like about like story structure and stuff. Like Stephen King has a really good one called like literally called On Writing. So I read that. I kind of like studied up on like how you actually write a book, but everybody's like you kind of just have to like it's like riding a bike. You have to just sit down and try. And then once I had finished the book, like I was like, oh, okay, I wrote this book, it's gonna be awesome, I'm gonna like sell it for $1 million, and my dad's gonna feel really dumb, they told me I'm gonna be a writer. And then when I tried to actually get it published, like it was rejected by every literary agent like in New York City. So that book wasn't published, but eventually like I just kept going and I wrote another book. So it was really just like sitting down, like having an idea and sticking with it, because like half of getting a book out there is actually having a finished book.
Okay, so now we're going to move to some questions submitted by Mr. Anspic's classes. And they are curious to know how long it took you to write your first book, start to finish, and when you were able to publish your first book, what that process was like, and how long it took as well.
So I wrote the draft of my first book in like a couple months, and then I made like a huge mistake, which is one that a lot of writers do, and they think that like once you write your book, like you're done, it's perfect, it's good to go, like you don't need to revise it or rewrite it or anything. So I mean, hence I sent it out to like the process of getting a book published, you can't just like send your book off to like HarperCollins or something and have it considered to be published. You have to do something called get a literary agent first, and the literary agent will work with you to revise the book, edit it, and then they send it to editors. So that first book did not get a literary agent because it was really terrible. So I wrote another book. That one took a couple months too, but the second time around, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this right this time. I'm going to get other people to actually like read my book and critique it, give me feedback. I'm going to revise it before I send it to agents. And like that whole process took like months. And then it took like another 3 or 4 months to actually get responses from agents because it takes them a while to read. And I found a literary agent and she was very excited about the book. And she sent it out to a bunch of publishers, and every single publisher rejected that book. So even when you get a literary agent, it doesn't mean like, oh, it's going to be like easy sailing. You're going to get a book deal. So I finally did get a book deal writing a series for a publisher, which is the Prep School Confidential series. And like the time frame for that was, I mean, I started writing my first book in 2009. I didn't sell my first book until the end of 2011, and then the book wasn't published until 2013. So it's really not like an overnight thing. It takes a long time. There's a lot of waiting involved.
A lot of perseverance involved there, right? Okay, so I love this next question. It comes from a student named Olivia, and she would like to know what led you to write murder mysteries specifically.
So my parents let me watch like probably things that were really inappropriate for like a 5 or 6-year-old to watch. Like I grew up watching like Law and Order and Dateline, so I probably just had kind of like a sick, twisted view of entertainment from a young age. And I think like also I write about things that like make me anxious or scare me. And I mean, probably because I was allowed to watch Dateline when I was 6 years old, I grew up with like an intense fear of like being murdered. So like I shared this fear with my parents. I was like, I'm afraid that somebody's gonna break into the house and murder me. And my dad's response was, that's ridiculous. Most people are murdered by people they know. And I was like, okay, well that doesn't actually make me feel better at all. So I kind of just like grew up kind of fascinated by this idea of like the terrible things that people do to each other. And I just read a lot of murder mysteries. It was always just like my favorite genre to read. I also just like kind of feeling like a detective when I'm reading a murder mystery and trying to puzzle things out myself. So like that being said, the first book that I wrote was not a murder mystery. It actually was like a comedy. And then I just found out that like, I'm not that funny, like let's go to murder.
Okay, so it feels like your book, The Cheerleaders, is possibly set in Bellport, and many students would like to know what led you to write a book connected to Bellport.
So it's funny because The Cheerleaders wasn't inspired by Bellport. That weekend was inspired by Bellport, but people see a lot of Bellport in The Cheerleaders. It was actually inspired by a small town upstate where something similar happened, where there was like a string of murders and suspicious deaths involving cheerleaders. But there, I think as I was writing, it's just like I pulled from a lot of experiences of just like a small, idyllic village. So a lot of like the things that I was picturing probably look a lot like Bellport and the village and like everybody like rallying around like the football team and athletics being a big deal and stuff. So yeah, like a lot of people have seen that, and there are like some Easter eggs with like the names of things. Like people are like, oh, can you like name a character after me or something? I'll never like outright name a character after somebody, but like I'll steal names here and there.
Okay, so we would also love to learn more about your work as a TV writer. So a student named Tristan has asked, can you tell us more about your experience as a TV writer and what motivated you to become a TV writer?
So it actually happened completely by accident. It was a very like weird story how that happened. So my book, Prep School Confidential, was optioned for a TV series by a producer, and he had read the book, and he like called me up through my agent, and he was like, "How do you feel about like adapting the pilot yourself? Like typically when you sell like rights to a book, they'll hire a writer to write the pilot and try to sell it. but they asked me if I wanted to do it. Like I felt really cool and special at the time, and then later I found out it was because they didn't have to pay me as much as they would have had to pay like a well-known screenwriter. So yeah, that was fun. I still make more than I would make on a book though. There's a lot more money in TV writing, unfortunately. But so that was, I kind of like fell into that by accident, and so I worked with this producer to write a pilot for Presention Confidential, and then we went to pitch it to like TV networks, and we pitched the CW network, and the head of the CW, like right there in the room, was like, yeah, I don't want to make this a TV show, literally nobody would watch that, but do you want to write something else for us instead? And I was like, okay, sure. Like, yeah, I want to write for TV. Who doesn't? Like, I'm 22 and I just graduated college and I can't find a teaching job. Like, yeah, sure, I'll write for TV. So it was kind of like a weird, like, accidental thing that I just fell into, and it was so different from writing a book because, I mean, they had hired me to write something without even having an idea. So they were just like throwing like ideas at me, like maybe we could do something like this, and like some of like a lot of the ideas were just like god awful. It's like a TV show about mermaids. I'm like, really? Like this is really dumb. But eventually I like an idea was brought to me by Rashida Jones, who is an actress, but she's also a writer. And I loved that idea. Like we wrote the pilot, we spent so much time writing that script, and it's very different from writing books because like when you're writing a book, you're writing it by yourself. It's all your idea, and then you just like give it to an editor and they give you feedback. When you're writing for TV, you have like a million people throwing ideas at you, and like their ideas are conflicting sometimes. So like you kind of have to like keep this one producer happy, but like also the head of the CW doesn't like what the producer likes. So it was very different from writing a book. And then at the end of the day, they didn't even film the pilot. And that's just how like TV writing is. They buy so many scripts and they don't all wind up getting filmed. So it was a really interesting experience. I didn't wind up like staying in that world because of that reason. Like I wanted to be like more in control of my ideas and not have people like calling me to be like, oh, they don't like what you described this character like wearing in this scene. And I'm like, okay, fine, like I'll just change it. Like everything is like such a big deal in TV. So I found that like the pace of books was much more like leisurely. I had a little bit more control. But I do miss like the money that they can do. It's a lot better. Understandable. Okay, so we also have some questions about writer's block. If you experience writer's block, how you overcome that? Are there any other struggles you experience as a writer? And what your daily routine of reading and writing and possibly listening to true crime podcasts looks like? Yeah, I mean, writer's block is, for me, there's writer's block, and then there's like my inner critic, where I'm just sitting down, I'm trying to write, and I'm just convinced that like everything I'm doing is garbage, my editor is gonna hate it. And then there's also just like writer's block where I don't know how to move forward in the story, and a lot of the time it's because I made like a wrong turn somewhere, and like I have to go back and fix something for it to actually make sense, like the way that the story is progressing. So for me, I kind of just have to like diagnose the problem. Is it like a problem with the book, or is it a problem with me? Like, do I need a nap? Like, am I just like burned out or something? And a lot of it is, like you mentioned, like listening to true crime podcasts. Like a lot of it is like your brain, like the creative part of your brain is a muscle, and if you're not really like exercising it, and you're just like sitting there and you're trying to get out words to meet a deadline, like you're obviously not going to feel creative. You're not going to like produce your best work. So you have to find ways to like refill your creativity. And for me, like, yeah, that means like watching a lot of like really bad TV, and like really, my obsession lately is to show air disasters. Like I'm really just obsessed with plane crashes. I don't know like why, but it helps me to like learn about plane crashes, and then I'm like, okay, like I'm good to go now. I think it's just like you need to turn off your brain and do something else for a little while. So a lot of the time when I feel like I have writer's block, it really just means I've been staring at the screen for too long and I need a break. Do you have a routine for writing where
every day you start your day with an hour of writing, or does it look different each day and the flexibility kind of tools you?
Yeah, so for many years I did write full time. Like it was like my job. Like I got up in the morning and it was just like writing all day. And it's really hard when you have so much time to like figure out how to structure your day. So I always I find that my brain is a little sharper in the morning, so I like to start writing I get up, I have my coffee, and then I sit down and I'll write for a couple hours, and then I really just need a break to do something else. And there's a lot of that goes into writing and publishing that is not the actual writing. When I have a book coming out, I'll have interviews that I'll have to do for blogs, or I'll have to do guest essays and stuff. I'll have emails from my agent or editor, hey, what do you think of this draft of the book cover? Or if I'm in the deep into revisions and I just got an edit letter from my editor, sometimes I'll have to have phone calls to talk through and do brainstorming stuff. So it's not all writing. I do try to carve out time during the day to read whatever I can, because I just find that helps clear my brain. I'll read a lot of nonfiction, for research purposes, true crime books, forensic books, because I obviously want to know how all that works, and that feels that counts as work to me, and binging Netflix shows, that's all research, that counts. But now that I don't write full time anymore, I work part time as a librarian, my routine has changed a lot, so I don't have as much of that free time to do the more creative stuff, read. So a lot of it is just not being precious about the process and just getting as many words done as I can, and then worrying about revising and editing it later.
Thank you. I know that we have lots of questions that our staff members would like to ask, so I'm wondering, Mr. Budris, would you like to ask a question here?
Yeah. Hey, Karen. So, how old is your son?
4.5.
4.5. So, how old does he have to be allowed to read one of your books that involves murder and death and that kind of thing?
I don't want him ever reading any of my books. If I had my way, none of my family would ever be allowed to read any of my books. My mom read my first book for adults and texted me the horrified face emoji and was there's a sex scene. And I was it's for adults. So I don't want anybody in my family reading my books. But my son, the death stuff, I think he's even creepier than I am, because you know how little kids will say really creepy things sometimes. He was with his grandma, my mom, and she was having trouble getting up off of the floor because she's old. And she's oh, James, I'm old. And he's that's okay, because when you're old, you go to heaven and then come back as a baby. I'm okay, I don't know where you learned that, but you're a little creep, and maybe you got it from me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Santana, would you like to take on this question?
First of all, I want to say thank you for coming back. Very impressive. Does writing play a role in a therapeutic sense? I know we've talked about publishing books, but how important is it for you to just journal and just get your thoughts out on paper and just the writing process itself? Not through the lens of getting a book published, but just in terms of it being sort of therapeutic.
Yeah, that is a huge part for me. I mean, I kind of touched on it when I said that I started writing my first book because I was in a situation where I was really unhappy and anxious, and writing was my escape from the situation around me. My first year of college was not what I expected it to be, and that was kind of my release. And yeah, it's still, even though I am like writing with the goal of getting published now, it is something that I just kind of like need to get out all of my thoughts. Like, I mean, I'll have like my thoughts and I'll have like the book I want to write, and it's like, sure, it's a murder mystery, but as I'm like building the characters, like sometimes I'll project my own anxieties onto them, and just it's kind of like working like through your own stuff by seeing like how your characters would deal with certain situations. But yeah, I mean, I tend to have like a very like chaotic mind, and getting like all my thoughts out, even like the outlining process and just creating characters, is kind of a way to like quiet some of the chaos.
Okay, I see Mr. A in the back there, and I know that Mr. A has read all of Ms. Thomas's books and reads them regularly with his book club. So let's see, Mr. Anspig, would you like to ask a question here?
Well, just one question about writing process. You know, you talked about first draft writing. Do you type everything at this point? Do you do anything handwritten?
I used to have a notebook where I had like some handwritten notes. Like if I wasn't by my computer, I would like handwrite an outline. But now I'm just like on the move so much that I do it in a notes app on my phone. So there is a very long notes app on my phone of just like complete unhinged thoughts, and like if anybody ever like found my phone and read the notes, like they would probably like call the FBI, because it's like kind of just like random notes about different like murder weapons and like places that you could like hide a body on Long Island. But it's just like things that will like come into my head, and I'm like not by my computer, so I kind of need to just like write it down separately. So yeah, I used to do a lot of that by hand, but now it's on my phone. It's probably better that it's on my phone, because my phone is always with me. Nobody's gonna find it.
Okay, I see Ms. Freeman's hand up in the back there, so go ahead.
So I heard you say that you wrote for the variety show when you were here, which I used to run the variety show way back when. How important is it for you, like how encouraging for our students to do things like that, to write for the variety show, to write for that?
It was such an important part of my high school career, because I mean, I'm not an athletic person. I didn't do sports or anything. So just having that outlet outside of class, because I mean, you're in class all day. You're being told for the most part, you're being told what you can read. Like you get writing assignments. You have all this homework. So just having that creative outlet at the end of the day, I mean, it was something to look forward to. It was back when I did it, like the advisor was just so great. Like she let us do some like really wacky stuff, honestly. Like sometimes she was like, okay, no, you can't say that on a high school stage in front of 500 people. But for the most part, she was really just very encouraging of like these crazy ideas we had. And yeah, I mean, it was really, it really gave us like something to look forward to, because I mean the day, like you're working like towards like, oh, college and all this other stuff and getting good grades, but like it's important just to be able to have fun at the end of the day.
Okay, so as we begin to close out, I would like to take a moment to recognize that every person in this room has valuable skills and limitless potential, and to encourage you to take a moment to think about how you would like to apply your skills and talents in the future. What could you come back to Bellport High School as an alumni in the future and share with us during an assembly? So hold on to that thought and work towards that goal a little bit every day, and know that you are surrounded by teachers and staff members who would love to help you along the way. We're very excited to see how all of your dreams and goals unfold. Also, we have some very special thank you. We'd like to thank Ms. Della Rosa for her administrative support. We would like to thank Mr. Budris for connecting us with Ms. Thomas. And we would like to thank Ms. Palladino for coordinating all of the logistics. Of course, we would like to thank in a very special way Ms. Thomas for spending her time with us so generously today and sharing